minister of the North Shore Unitarian Universalist Church.
Amen.
We have walked over branching streets to be here together, and we welcome invited clergy, invited guests. We welcome longtime members who have been part of this church in difficult times as well as in glorious times. And we have new members, and we have friends, and young people who are also an important part of the future of this church, a future that is very bright. But most of all, we are here today to welcome Julie as our minister, to join the heritage begun in 1850. Ministers who have served this church. I can tell her, and she knows this already, that as one of those ministers, it is a creative, committed, and supportive congregation. And we know we are very fortunate to have Julie as our minister who will bring her caring, understanding, and warmth to us. Welcome, everyone.
Let us now be aware of this moment in all its beauty and promise. Gracious giver of life, we thank you for this day. It is a gift to us to enjoy in our freedom. Truly being here is so much because everything here apparently needs us. We are here in order to help each other discover what it means to praise all things, summer, fall, and the sea. We gather to celebrate all that keeps us going and to challenge all that brings discouragement in our hearts, and to make a covenant of faith, which is the necessary art of helping others. Gathered here in the mystery of this hour, we ask for blessings. Bless Julie, who begins her ministry in this church. Bless Julie's family, who have come here with her to begin a new life. Bless Julie's loved ones, who long since have prepared her so well for life. Bless the congregation, who are with Julie in the ministry of this church. Bless all who have come today to help carry Julie and our congregation over the threshold of our daring new course in the religious celebration of the long human experience of love. We pray for the strength to keep the inspiration of this hour by giving ourselves to everyone who needs us. Let love be the life of our lives. Let forgiveness be the door which opens to it. The call to ministry we extend to Julie be also a call to each of us to keep the covenant of faith, hope, and love in our hearts, our actions, our church, and our community. Amen. Amen.
So, we'd like to ask you to join us in an a cappella version of hymn 362, Rise Up, O Flame.
My name is Maria,
And I'm Dave Prentice.
and we represent Danvers Interfaith Partnership, of which this congregation is a member. It's a newly formed membership that will bring people of faith together to inspire the spirit of understanding and cooperation among diverse religions, organizations in the Danvers community, and to be a visible witness for tolerance and respect between all faiths. To create opportunities for the people of Danvers to join in interfaith programs and projects that benefit the entire community. And finally, to model by word and deed the spirit of justice, compassion, and respect for all people. So that's our mission. But I want you to know that I and we are in rapturous joy because Julie and this community is part of our fellowship. We look forward to working and collaborating with each of you.
Friends arrived for supper, along with the rumbling of thunder. As we sat with them on the porch, we had to keep raising our voices a notch to make ourselves heard above the gathering storm. The huge tree beside our door began to sway, limbs creaking, leaves hissing. Above the trees and rooftops, the murky sky crackled with lightning. We heard the pop of a transformer as a bolt struck the power lines in our neighborhood. The pulse of thunder came faster until they merged into a continuous roar. We gave up talking. All teethed on thunderstorms, we sat on the porch to our supper. As we were lifting the first spoonful to our mouths, a stroke of lightning burst so nearby, it seemed to suck the air away. And the lights flicked out, plunging the whole street into darkness. After we caught our breath, we laughed respectfully, as one might laugh at the joke of a giant. The sharp smell of ozone and the musty smell of damp earth mingled with the aroma of the meal. A chill of pleasure ran up my spine. I lit a pair of candles, and the flames rocked in the gusts of wind. The wind fell away, trees stopped thrashing, the lightning let up, and the thunder ceased. The sudden stillness was more exciting than the earlier racket.
The smoldering yellow light came into the sky, as though the humid air had caught fire. We gazed at one another over the steady candle flames and knew without exchanging a word what this eerie lull could mean. Maybe we should go into the basement, my partner suggested. And leave this good meal, the guest replied. The wail of sirens broke the stillness, not the lesser cry of ambulance or fire engine or squad car, but the banshee howl of the civic defense siren a few blocks away. They must have sighted one, I said. We could take the food down with us on a tray, my partner said. It's up to you, I told them. We can go to the basement like sensible people, or we can sit here like fools and risk our necks. What do you want to do? One asked me. You're the guests. You're the hosts. I'd like to stay here and see what comes, I replied. My partner frowned, but there we stayed, savoring our food and the sulphurous light. Eventually, the siren quit. I could hear the rushing of a great wind like the whoosh of a waterfall. An utter calm stole over me. The hair on my neck bristled, my nostrils flared, heat rose in my face as though the tip of a wing had raked over it. Although I found myself still, our faces gleaming in the candlelight, for a spell I rode the wind, dissolved into it, and there was only the great wind rushing. Prudent folks would have gone to the basement. I do not recommend our decision. I merely report it. Why the others carried on the porch, I cannot say. But what kept me there was a mixture of curiosity and awe. I had never seen the whirling funnel except in cautionary films, where it left a wake of havoc and tears. And now, here was the tremendous power paying a visit. When a god comes calling, no matter how bad its reputation, would you go high? If the siren had announced the sighting of a dragon, I would have sat there just the same, hoping to catch a glimpse of the spiked tail or fiery breath.
At Reverend Julie's request, this afternoon's offering will be a 50-50 share of the plate. As a religious community, we are here for each other in good times and in bad, but we also reach into the greater community around us. At a previous church I attended, someone asked, would anyone notice if our church wasn't here anymore? NSUU's absence would certainly be noted at Brayburn Gardens, the long-term care facility at Brooksby Village. In those hallways 4 times a month, Soul Song brings love, companionship, and peace through song to the residents who may be isolated, chronically ill, or actively dying. Our musical mission is deeply meaningful to those of us who sing, and we are so appreciative of NSUU's support in providing practice space, moral support, and in the offering today, 50% of which will go to Soul Song. As the offering is collected, Soul Song will sing, stating our commitment to stand with all of our brothers and sisters here and in the larger community.
Where the ocean meets the sand, here we stand with you. Where the daylight meets the stars, here we are with you. In this place beyond
last came to preach, I guess in March, I played the role of the Grim Reaper. You remember? Having been asked to address the topic of death. I must admit I wondered what might be going on in Danvers, inviting me in to talk about death. So I can't tell you how happy I am that your lasting memory of me might have to do with having the privilege of preaching at Julie's installation. A time of new life for the congregation, and I think what a great day for all of us here on the North Shore and the wider community. And ironically, I'm coming to the end of my own ministerial career as Julie is in her early stages of ministry. I'll finish up in Essex next Sunday as the choir sings the famous, actually Scott song that we Irish stole early on, entitled The Parting Glass. I may sneak into the church some of my favorite Tullamore Dew Irish whiskey, but I'm only telling you that. As you might imagine, in these last weeks and months, I've been doing a lot of reflection on ministry and its relationship to religious community. A journey I started 45 years ago as I entered a Catholic semi-monastic community with medieval roots, the Order of St. Dominic, otherwise known as the Order of Preachers. Although I remained in the community for 10 years, 6 in seminary, ordained in 1978, and worked 4 years in the South Bronx, there were early indications that it might not be a perfect fit. During seminary years, we played a lot of sports between studies and prayer. In playing basketball, I over and over again sprained my ankle and wound up going to chapel and to meals on crutches. Now, we had a 5 p.m. liturgy every day, and lots of lay people would come to that liturgy. And now, a brilliant and famous, I think famous, feminist scholar of the early church, maybe someone's heard of Francine Cardin, who would come to the Dominican house every day. She's now on the faculty at Boston College, and we became good friends. And after one of my many mishaps on the basketball court, as I entered the chapel on crutches, Francine said to me, lovingly and gently, but pointedly, "Art, why all this sublimation? Why don't you just get married?" Curiously enough, I began reflecting on my monastic journey recently after reading Julie's selection that was beautifully read by Kelly, and it does matter how you read. It was beautiful. Settling Down, you heard the title, from a set of essays called Staying Put, Making a Home in a Restless World by Scott Russell Sanders. I read Julie's selection several times. I don't know what parts of the reading might have touched each of you, but I was curious what touched Julie. What was her intent? What parts were especially meaningful to her? Other than the general focus that her intention was to stay here for the long haul at Danvers. And Julie replied, "My favorite part of the reading is the following. What kept me there was a mixture of curiosity and awe. When a God comes calling, no matter how bad its reputation, would you go hide? If the siren had announced the sighting of a dragon, I would have sat there just the same, hoping to catch a glimpse of the spiked tail or fiery breath. So I'm warning you, Danvers." Julie likes adventure and excitement. Settling down, staying put, making a home in a restless world. So, as you're all aware, with this installation, we're calling and affirming Julie to what is referred to in our denominational circles as settled ministry. As a former monk, when I read this, I immediately began thinking about the rule of Saint Benedict, one of the early monastics in the 6th century of the current era, who, when establishing the new community, made stability its central charism. Benedictine monks, even though most have active ministries, stay in one community their entire lives. They take a vow of stability. So I reflected upon this Benedictine call to stability, staying put, if you will, and I stumbled across a wonderful lecture by a contemporary theologian, Gerald Schlabach, given at a conference in 1998. And he titled his talk, "The Vow of Stability, a pre-modern way through a hyper-modern world." The author, who is married with 2 children and a promoter of what has been referred to as the new monasticism, describes himself as both a Mennonite and a Catholic Christian who tries to live the Benedictine vow of stability as a lay member of a community, and suggests we all consider such attachments in a world of conflict and unsettling mobility. Interestingly, Schlabach got the idea for this article while he was driving along the Ohio Turnpike and listening to Carole King. And I've been listening to her now ever since I read that. Singing one of her famous tunes, "So far away, doesn't anybody stay in one place anymore? It would be so fine to see your face at my door. Doesn't help to know we're just time away. One more song about moving along the highway. Traveling sure gets me down and lonely. Nothing else to do but close my mind. I sure hope the road don't come to own me. But we're so far away. Doesn't anybody stay in one place anymore? It would be so fine to see your face at our door." The author knows that suggesting a pre-modern monastic prescription for a 21st century life might seem a bit laughable. And he acknowledges he hasn't really lived the Benedictine stability, having moved around with his family looking for an academic career. Nevertheless, he argues the 3 vows Benedictine monks take: stability, staying put; obedience, let's call that one accountability to one another; and conversion, commitment to a life of peacemaking and justice, are well worth consideration by all who commit to a religious community, no matter what the denomination, I would suggest. "It's no use rediscovering any of our church roots," he goes on, "nor discerning innovative ways to be faithful to our congregation's calling if we won't slow down, stay longer, even if we can't stay put indefinitely, and take something like a vow of stability. Slow down, stay longer, because there's no way to discern God's will together without commitment to sit long together in the first place. A vow of stability, because it is no use discerning appropriate ways to be a good disciple or a faithful Unitarian Universalist in our age if we don't embody them through time, testing, and the patience with one another that our good ideas and great ideals need in order to prove their worth as a communal practice." As a contemporary shining example of the need for stability, the author raises up the modern environmentalist hero dear to many UUs, Wendell Berry, who as a poet and a farmer and an environmentalist has been arguing tenaciously that our very humanity may depend upon local communities that sustain relationship with the land. And believe it or not, in some coincidental way, if Berry's return to the land plea seems a stretch for most of us, doesn't this author, Schlabach, cite one of Julie's favorite, Scott Russell Sanders, who at another point in the essay that we didn't hear, challenges those who urge us to deal with difficulties by pulling up stakes and heading for new territory. People who root themselves in places are likelier to know and care for those places than are people who root themselves only in ideas. And he concludes, those who care about nothing beyond the confines of the parish are truly parochial and are at least mildly dangerous to the parish. On the other hand, those who have no parish, those who navigate ceaselessly among postal zones and area codes, those for whom the world is only a smear of highways and bank accounts and stores, are a danger not just to their parish, but to the planet. And concerning the relationship between our communities, our moral lives, and the future of our democracy, Schlabach cites philosopher Alistair MacIntyre, who suggests that our best hope is in renewed and localized forms of community, living lives of virtue. And I quote him, "Such communities must divest their hope in empire and shape their lives through narratives capable of countering empire's illusions. Only within such communities and traditions, which pass on their virtues through narratives, through heroes, through mentors, through ministers who embody them, will intellectual, civil, and moral life survive the competing wills to power that are preying on us." How appropriate those words are for the time we live in politically. Finally, suggests Schlabach, what I am saying is that any true and sustainable community will need the virtues of mutual patience and mutual submission that the vow of stability requires and engenders. And I think what an incredible challenge this perspective represents for us as a nation, for us as a denomination, and for you all as a congregation. But also, what an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of our members and the wider community. But this call for stability, staying put, building community, represent, I think, a real challenge for Unitarian Universalists and all those who link themselves to religious community in our day. Our Unitarian Universalist history has been forged by a perspective coming out of the so-called left wing of the Protestant Reformation. What James Luther Adams, a great Unitarian theologian, calls radical laicism. Radical laicism. We practice congregational polity. The members decide and are in charge. We ordain and we install ministers through an open and democratic process. Authority is local. It's an amazing idea. And a reaction against clerical corruption and misuse of authority. It respects individual voices and believes we are all sacred. It's utopia. It requires grace. It requires goodwill to make it work. And when it works well, and I actually think I've experienced it, it's powerful and transformative. We call what we do in UU congregations, like others, shared ministry. A wonderful ideal. Called, professionally trained ministers working with skilled and committed laypersons, Chris. As James Luther Adams reminds us, the goal is the prophethood and priesthood of all believers, the one for the liberty of prophesying, the other for the ministry of healing. And we accomplish that goal when we listen to one another and offer a healing and nurturing presence, and take that into the wider community to overcome injustice and inequality by our powerful communal actions, like the one Julie and others in this room participated in Lynn a few weeks ago, Brother Andre, as 400 or so people walked the streets and called for justice for immigrants and for all our people. Shared ministry, an amazing responsibility. For it to work, it requires staying put, settling down for the long haul, thus making a home in a restless world and building an effective presence. And all of that, it seems to me, takes great maturity and deepening spiritual commitment, both on the part of the minister and all of us in the congregation. And when differences emerge, which they will, we have to counter our instinct to fight or flee, remembering we committed to staying put. You know, Unitarian Universalists love jokes about how we think about ourselves. We can't be told what to believe. We're proud that we're like herding cats. We're free to develop our own spiritual paths, like the one about the visitor to a UU church who, after sitting through a long sermon with growing incredulity at the ideas being spouted, was asked afterwards by a member, "So what'd you think?" To which he answered, "I can't believe half the things the minister said," expressing deep upset. "Oh, good," said the member. "You'll fit right in." Individuality is precious, but so is community and consensus. As I wind down my own ministerial journey started 45 years ago, the first 10 as part of this monastic community, the last 26, incredibly grateful as a UU minister. I've been reading a pamphlet entitled "Running Through the Thistles," a reflection on how to end a long ministry well. Some years ago, one of our UU ministers gave a lecture on this topic with the same title, and among other things, in reflecting upon the idea of shared ministry and our congregational notion of radical laicism, said that James Luther Adams, our great theologian's notion, seemed to him to obfuscate distinctions and blurred boundaries, necessary in his mind between clergy and laity. Thus, as a consequence, he went on, flattening of the congregational landscape that makes it more difficult to differentiate between laity and clergy. A kind of religious egalitarianism that invites us to underestimate the influence, responsibility, and authority infused in the ministerial role. In response to this reflection on shared ministry and the boundaries and distinctions and the so-called flattening of the congregational landscape, making it difficult to differentiate lay and clergy, a retired mentor to the speaker suggested on the very same stage in his formal response that he wasn't so sure the idea of radical laicism is just the notion of James Luther Adams, a very recent colleague, but has a much earlier heritage. The Reformation, anyone? Or maybe the early church, if we read the Acts of the Apostles. This mentor on that stage went on to suggest that maybe we need much more discussion and clarity around the term shared ministry or co-ministry, and just how we understand the particular roles and responsibilities of each of us. I think each congregation needs to have that conversation. A wonderful way to build relationship and trust, thus taking the notion of shared ministry seriously. I must admit that one of my best compliments I ever received in regard to ministry happened in Pittsburgh, where I served for 12 years in our Allegheny church. My first Unitarian Universalist ministerial calling. After an all-day urban summer camp session with about 40 neighborhood children, very few actually from our congregation, it was a pretty messy scene, so I grabbed a mop and a pail and began cleaning up with others. After finishing, I was introduced to one of the mothers who declared with a huge smile of approval, "Reverend Howard, my daddy was a Baptist minister many years ago, and he often said to me, 'You can trust a minister who carries a mop.'" So that was Pittsburgh, and in that context, it was one of the ways I understood shared ministry. Now that may differ here in Danvers, so let's not be too literal. But you get the idea. Trust becomes the bottom line in the quest to develop a vibrant shared ministry in any context. And building trust takes time, it takes commitment, it takes honesty, it takes willingness, and yes, stability. Staying put, digging in for the long haul, building something special, not pulling up stakes when you want to fight with the last sermon or challenge a decision made by the Board of Trustees. So reflecting on this ancient rule of St. Benedict with its centering on stability, writes Schlabach, we might indeed, in our hyper-modern world, we might need to hear old lessons through voices that are new and a bit exotic for us. The lesson is that we may not, I'm losing it. We shall pause for a moment. The lesson is that what we need may not be a new theory, but the virtue of patience and the practice of hunkering down to stay together through the long haul as we listen to God and one another, believing that something is there beyond us and beyond our every ability to construct reality, to which we must listen. Although I didn't take my friend Francine Cartman's advice to marry right away, but instead got ordained and cut my ministerial teeth in the South Bronx for 4 years, I eventually did choose to leave and marry happily, which eventually opened up the possibility to continue ministry in a new context. A wonderful, open, and affirming Unitarian Universalist context. 12 years in Pittsburgh and 14 in Essex, for which I am eternally grateful. And true to form, to the end, when I met at the Essex UU Church with a representative from our regional Unitarian Universalist office for an exit interview, as she walked into the church hall, she came over to me and asked to see the minister. Who just happened to be pushing a broom. Much to her surprise, and I might add, delight. The interview was a joy with a touch of sadness sprinkled in. So I'm delighted to be here to no longer play the role of the Grim Reaper, but rather one who is affirming a new ministry, a new relationship with incredible joy. My favorite line in the essay on staying put is after the partner suggested they take the food to the basement to get out of harm's way, and the protagonist said, it's up to you. We can go to the basement like sensible people, or we can sit here like fools and risk our necks. And there they stayed put. A God came calling, and they decided not to hide. Julie and members of the Danvers UU Church, this is the best risk you'll ever take. I encourage you to all settle in, stay put, and make it the best it can be, a home of faith, hope, and love in a restless, confused world.
We will walk together, you and I, walk together hand in hand. Come on, we will walk together, heads held high. We will reach the promised land. Come, my friend,
As your trusted, hopefully, and no, not obedient, but mutually accountable servant, to lead the congregation in affirming the vote we took on Sunday, May 7th. The members of the North Shore Unitarian Universalist Church voted to call Julie to serve as our settled minister. So we have gathered here today to formally recognize the relationship between Julie and this congregation. In the full freedom of the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we have chosen her to be our minister, and she has chosen us in return. This mutual choice carries with it a commitment to our continuing search for the best ways to serve each other and the wider world. Are we, the congregation, ready to accept this commitment? I now ask the members and friends of North Shore Unitarian Universalist Church to rise in body or spirit and read together in unison. We are ready and willing to take on ourselves our obligations and hereby install you, Julie Lombard, as minister of our church. We ask that you dwell among us as a trusted friend, teacher, and minister. Julie, will you guide us, challenge us, and lead us, support us in joy, comfort us in sadness, and help our beloved community grow.
I will.
In return, we pledge to work with you in full collaboration, to offer our talents, our resources, our cooperation and trust, as we journey together in our shared religious faith community. Would all of Julie's...
That's ring, isn't it? Darn, Carol. Full of joy, gratitude, and enthusiasm, I gladly enter into this covenant with you, meeting trust with trust, forgiveness with forgiveness, and love with love. I humbly accept this congregation's call to serve it as your minister.
Would all of Julie's friends, family, and colleagues, and all the church's guests, please rise in body or spirit and join us in recognition of this act of installation? We recognize and affirm the commitment that the North Shore Unitarian Universalist Church and Reverend Julie Lombard have made. We rejoice with you. May the spirit of love guide the shared ministries. May this vision of being a beacon of hope and love fill our hearts, minds, and spirits as we work to offer learning, peace, and justice to the wider world.
spirit of life, we bring hearts and minds together as we give thanks for the installation and affirmation of the Reverend Julie Lombard as North Shore Unitarian Universalist Church's fourth settled minister. We appreciate that she follows a long line of clergy who served our parent congregations for Danvers and Peabody Unitarian and Universalist churches. We cherish our history and this beautiful sanctuary, which came to be because of our North Shore UU forebearers. Forever we are grateful to them for it and for these natural surroundings where we are rooted. This is a sacred place where one may seek peace and renewal from the challenges of life. May we always be its wise stewards. We are thankful for Julie's thoughtful, caring ministry to all who come here. This is a beloved, creative faith community, and we are thankful for its shared leadership, its shared ministry, and for the energy, hard work, and generous reaching out that is so warmly offered by everyone. As we sit in the peace of this meeting room, may our hearts be full of love. May we know the value of sitting in stillness and carry this understanding with us. May each person's inner life be strengthened and refreshed. May we be good listeners. May we be inspired and strong and courageous as we further discern what will be our voice and action in the broader community for our fellow human beings and our environment. As individuals and as a congregation, may we grow in understanding of life's mystery and complexity. We ask this in the name of all that is good. Amen.
I've got a roof over my head. I've got a warm place to sleep. Sometimes I lie awake counting gifts instead of counting sheep. I've got a... I know I should have brought my music. Wait, I'm going to go get the music. Because I know it. I practiced it 14 times.
I want to make two observations about ministry and these days we are living in as I begin to offer you this charge and this new ministry you're undertaking. Starting with sharing with you these words from the Presbyterian minister Eugene Peterson. Peterson writes, "There is a cultural assumption that all leaders are people who get things done and make things happen. That is certainly true of the primary leadership models that seep into our awareness from the culture. Politicians, business people, advertisers, publicists, celebrities, and athletes. But Peterson says, while being a pastor certainly has some of these components, the pervasive element in our 2,000-year pastoral tradition is not someone who gets things done, but rather the person placed in the community to pay attention and call attention to what is going on right now between men and women, with one another and with God. This kingdom of the holy that is primarily local, relentlessly personal, and prayerful without ceasing." Secondly, I want to observe we are living in anxious times. The state of our nation and our world, if you haven't noticed, is in peril. I wake up in the morning worrying about this. How will we as people of faith respond? The stakes are high and people are feeling the pressure, right? But you know, we live in a culture of doing. Many of us who go into the ministry, we want to make things better. We'd like to be able to fix things now and then, especially these days. But the real power we have as ministers is our presence. Too often we are too quick to dismiss that power, to think that we need to be doing something. So I charge you, Julie, to remember that your presence is your greatest gift. Not just for the people of this congregation and the community you serve, but for your family as well. They need your presence too. What people really need most, I believe, is to be seen and heard and understood. And when you're too busy doing and fixing, it's hard to maintain that presence. So I charge you to set aside time for your family and to feed your own soul. Be sure to take your days off. Be religious about this. Turn off your computer and screen your phone calls. Don't call back unless it's an emergency. Ministry may be a 24/7 vocation, but if you don't find space for renewal, you're going to burn out, and we need you. On a daily basis, make some time for some kind of spiritual practice, some way to be in the presence of that which is always more. As the psalmist wrote a few thousand years ago, be still and know that I am God. I don't know how one can minister without that time for stillness and without that deep knowing. It's vital, especially these days, for leaders to know how to step back and take the wider view. What the adaptive leadership folks call getting up on the balcony, so you can see the big picture and your part in it, so you can reflect on what's really going on. So put to use all your good learning about systems theory. Make it a habit to assess the anxiety level in the system so you know what needs attention, and when it's time to calm things down, you do that. And when it's time to turn up the heat, you know it's time to do that. Don't just trust your own impressions of this. Check out your hunches and your observations with trusted leaders here. Seek out their assessment too. And when you're assessing the system, don't forget to regularly assess yourself. To be aware of your own anxiety level, what's going on inside you. One quick example of this, when I failed at this, one day this winter, I was running out of the house late to get to work, on my way to church. I had a lot to do and I was feeling some pressure. So I was annoyed, to say the least, when I discovered that the battery in my car was dead. On the way home from church, I'd left it turned on Sunday afternoon because I was listening to music and the keys were in there and it was dead. So I hooked it to a charger, which I happened to have, and was on my way maybe an hour, 90 minutes later, only to see that that little red light on my dashboard was on, indicating I was almost out of gas. My wife, who is oftentimes much wiser than I am, said to me, "Can you see that these two things, a dead battery and running out of gas, are symbols for your life right now?" She was right, and I vowed to work on that. So pay attention to those symbols that show up in your life and listen to the wise people in your midst. Finally, I charge you to know your limits. This work of ministry is about relationship and presence, and it takes time, this staying put. And if you're staying put, you've got time. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And you know the work will never be done. You simply can't do it all. So remember what called you to the ministry in the first place and focus on that. Pay attention to what this particular church needs from its minister and do that as best you can. But don't be afraid to tell them, I don't know how to do this, or some of you are better at this part of ministry than I am. Don't be afraid to say, this is not part of my job. Don't be afraid to ask for help from your colleagues, from your people, from your family, from God. On this day, when you have entered into a new relationship with the good people of this congregation, and you have pledged yourself to them, I charge you to remember the vows you made first, back when you and Greg were married, and also the implicit vows you two made when you became parents. Most people never see the many sacrifices the minister's family made. Your family needs you and you need them. Showing up for recitals and teacher conferences and date nights with Greg is important. There will always be another church committee meeting, but time with your children is fleeting. Julie, you have many gifts for ministry, and you have already done some great work here. You and this congregation are a good match for one another, and I offer you this benediction. Life is short, and we do not have much time to gladden the hearts of those who make the journey with us. So be swift to love, and make haste to be kind. And may God bless you and your ministry here. Amen.
You can go to sit, because I want to talk to your congregation.
All right.
Hello, congregation. You have heard it said, love one another. And this is my charge to you, this dear North Shore Unitarian Universalist congregation who has called Julie Lombard to become your settled minister. Love one another. Though not like the love of puppy dogs and unicorns and rainbows, but love one another with a fierce compassion and with justice and mercy. The kind of love, justice, and mercy that reflects our shared Unitarian Universalist values of building a world of equality, compassion, commitment, and connection. You have come to know one another and your newly installed Reverend Julie Lombard over these past few years, as I have, and I know that you have had that same pleasure of getting to know her, because as her mentor and colleague, I have had that same. And when we meet, we talk about her ministry with you, and I hear about the deepening love and connection you have been forging. It is good. Love one another enough to deepen this connection. Dig deep into the heart and soul of your life together. Julie tells me of her two tremendous ministers who are here. Minister Emeritus, and minister who was here when you first started. They offer her much support. I'm glad to hear about that too, because I've just been named Minister Emerita and I need models. Yes. Because you have demonstrated honor and respect for your past ministers and have continued a strong, positive relationship with them, I know you will honor and respect Julie too. Let her, as you let them, explore with you new ways of being together as a church, as a religious and spiritual community. Love one another with gentle honesty. We are living in a rude and crude world right now, where basic human rights and decency are being denied. Don't become part of the problem, become part of the solution. Bring gentle kindness and human compassion into all your interactions, not just within the church, but out into the wider world. and be open to one another's different opinions and ideas, and continue to provide an environment for honest reflections on things that will improve your life together and make this the most meaning-filled Unitarian Universalist congregation that it can be. Love one another in laughter and in joy, and struggle and challenge. Celebrate your successes. I want to tell you, as a newly retired Unitarian Universalist minister, I am incredibly proud of the hard work you did together to make the decision to put up a Black Lives Matter banner. Hard work, but together you did that. And now I charge you to continue to model that style of being together. Continue with those thoughtful and hard conversations, your soul-searching conversations and reflections. Maintain both what I call a safe and a brave environment. Safety is underrated. Bravery, that's what it takes to be a congregation together with your new person, your new minister, to establish that personal, spiritual, community-minded way of being together that reflects your deep-held values as a people gathered in a holy community. And if you continue to build on those values, you will love one another into a long and successful ministry. My final words of charge to you, this marvelous congregation, are these. The world needs you. And to see and hear your message, our Unitarian Universalist message of hope, of love, justice, and truth. Julie wants and desires a partnership with you to make this reality. And if you love one another in the way I am charging you to, sometime in the future you can look back and say, wow, that love we shared is more than unicorns, though magical and fantastical thinking can be great. And it is more than puppy dogs, though the loyalty and joy of puppy love is overflowing. And it is more than rainbows, though hope is known when we are bound together in a covenant of care and relationship. If you love one another, one day you can say, we took that charge to love one another very seriously, and we are very, very good together. So be about that now and into the future. May it be so.
We're all processing out. All of us. And we'll just keep singing until we all get out to the bell. Don't worry. Charles and Ed will be